Back here on the Rich Eisen Show, my colleague from the NFL Network, NFL Media Group, and NFL Insider, Tom Pelissero. Good to see you, Tommy P. How are you?
Doing great, Rich. What's up to my fellas in the studio?
Hey, Tommy.
What's up, baby?
I'll be seeing you guys in person.
That's right.
Next week. I can't
right.
wait. I'm jumping back in the chair.
Yes.
Oh, let's go.
All
I'll be
right.
here while I'm in London. I'll be doing my fortnight of calling two games: Jets, Vikings, Bears, Jaguars. I appreciate that.
I can get my A.J. Brown updates in person.
Yeah, great.
It's a bye next week, Brockman. Just plan for week 6.
Nice. There you go.
So he's not playing this week.
All right,
then.
stop.
Sorry.
Tom,
It's a very important question.
Tom, what's up with Micah Parsons right now? What can you tell me? Him and Tank Lawrence and those guys?
Well, what I can tell you as of this morning, the Cowboys were optimistic that neither one of those injuries was going to be something long term. The DeMarcus Lawrence one, honestly, to me, was scarier because anytime you see a guy who his foot just gets stuck in the ground and it almost looks like he feels some type of a pop in there, that's going to be the bigger concern. As far as Micah Parsons, he gets 600 pounds of man that lands on him in different directions in that situation here. I know Rappaport reported this morning the thinking is it's a high ankle sprain for Micah Parsons. But again, they've got a bye in the not too distant future here. Neither one of these, again, as of this morning, going through the medical process, there wasn't a great deal of concern about them being long term. You never want to lose any of those guys. But the fact that on a little bit of a sloppy night against the Giants, and there were a lot of weird moments in that game, they found a way to go and get a much-needed win on the road over a divisional opponent in New York, which maybe lets people breathe a little bit down there at the Cowboys facility this week.
I know I'm kind of throwing a little curve here, but is Deron Bland still on target to return when the Cowboys expect? Because it did seem, again, that's the whole business with the all-inness, and I know that we weren't thinking they were going to add anybody on the back end of their defense. It would have been somebody in their backfield, and we heard all week how they couldn't afford Derrick Henry, but it is a depth question certainly at the cornerback spot right now for the Cowboys. Tom.
Well, I mean, they were rolling Andrew Booth last night, who was acquired in a late round, or not even a late round swap. It was a player for player swap right before the cutdown deadline in a trade with the Vikings. Booth was a second round pick once upon a time, but you're not going into a season and going, boy, I hope we've got Andrew Booth matched one-on-one in a national TV game against a divisional opponent. But that's what you had last night, and Malik Neighbors put him in a blender once there. But that's sometimes you get into your depth. As far as Deron Bland. And this goes back to August. My understanding was this was similar to a Jones fracture, but it wasn't a full fracture for Deron Bland. So the thinking was somewhere in that 6 to 8 week range is probably where he'd be back. That would put him on target to potentially start practicing as soon as next week. Cowboys haven't said yet whether or not the window is going to open, but with several days to evaluate here, going through the mini bye here, they'll have a good feel of this by the end of the weekend, whether potentially Deron Bland could be on the field again as soon as Monday.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, if we're talking about injured reserve players and when we can see them, words I never said before, didn't think I would say. Christian McCaffrey's apparently back from Germany. And what's the latest with him and his Achilles tendonitis? Is that what we're calling it? Is that official? What can you tell me what's up with him, Tom?
It's an Achilles injury. And what I would say is, as much as people go, he's going to Germany, this must mean it's really bad. There's a lot of players, Rich, who have gone and sought different types of treatment that are done in Europe for various injuries. That's where some of the leading doctors in the world are. There's a lot of different things that players can do with, you normally hear about it with, for instance, knees. There's a lot of guys who will go and get PRP or something like that for knee issues, but there is medical data supporting doing it for an Achilles as well. Now that does tell you for Christian McCaffrey, this is something that he's been going through since the end of July. So we're 2 months into this process. They rested him for about a month in training camp. Obviously, that didn't entirely resolve the issue. Now you're several weeks into sitting him down again since the surprise scratch back in week 1. It does make some level of logical sense that, if it's not resolving, if rest didn't fix it before, then maybe you got to try to do something a little bit more proactive to get you back on track. Anytime you have those procedures, there is a rest period that comes up here. We don't have a clear timetable yet. We know from John Lynch talking on the radio earlier this morning, McCaffrey is now back in the United States. This is one of those ones that might be a little bit unpredictable, Rich, because it's not a torn ACL, it's not a high ankle sprain, it's an Achilles issue, it's not a tear, it's a different type of a pain that he's feeling in that area. It's obviously bothering him enough that Kyle Shanahan said it himself, the worst day he had was when he was trying to ramp up into week 1. The 49ers have to find a way to stay afloat. They've had a lot of injuries. It sounds like they're getting Kittle back this week. Debo's back on the field. Whether or not he plays in this game or it's in their next game, that's certainly a good sign there. But, this is one of the top players in the NFL. That challenges you as a whole. And there's just not necessarily anything definitive, because even if and when Christian McCaffrey gets back onto the field, there's always the possibility this is something that's still nagging him. So he's trying to figure it out.
And then the injured reserving of Tua was supposed to just give him the space and take away the timeline conversation when it comes to him, Tom. And, then he travels with the team on a 6-hour flight, and the quarterback situation in Seattle for Miami was just seemingly a lost cause, And so we're hearing rumblings about maybe knocking on Denver's door for Zach Wilson, or seeing how things play out with Pittsburgh's Wilson. Are the Dolphins quarterback shopping, knocking on doors, or they're already expecting Tua back? What is the timeline of it, even though we're supposed to give the space to that with his injured reserving, Tom?
Well, I would tell you this, Rich. At last check, the Dolphins hadn't called either of those teams. If you're thinking Tua Tagovailoa is not going to play for the rest of the season, you would think you would be looking for those long-term answers. Maybe it's one of those guys who's a backup quarterback. Maybe it's somebody else's starter who potentially could become available if that team is losing games and is out of the hunt and is just looking to get a draft pick for somebody. But for the Dolphins right now, with Tua Tagovailoa, he did make that trip. The doctors cleared him to fly. It's like 6 hours cross country to Seattle. They cleared him to make that trip. And basically, the short version, this is not the medical version, but the short version of what they've told him is, hey, if you're feeling good, do all your normal activities, just not football stuff. And that's what Tua wants. He wants to be engaged. He's been in meetings. He was on the sideline. He was talking to the quarterbacks. That all tracks with what we've been reporting, which is that Tua intends to be back on the field at some point in the future, and quite possibly later on this season. He's been visiting specialists this week. That was kind of the next checkpoint in that. There's specialists in Pittsburgh and Detroit that he visited back in 2022. You would anticipate those are among the specialists that he's visiting this time around as well. In terms of what they're doing this week, they put Skylar Thompson out there. Skylar Thompson had earned the job, the number 2 job back in training camp. He beat out Mike White for it. They've kept him around for 3 years. He started a playoff game for him. They see something in Skylar Thompson, but it didn't translate to the field. And then he got beat up and he got hit, and he's been dealing with a very painful rib injury, according to Mike McDaniel, has practiced on a limited basis. It's hard to imagine with that injury, Skylar Thompson is going to be out there this week, which then would leave you with Tim Boyle, who, just quite frankly, is a practice squad guy all the way. We've seen Tim Boyle play in the NFL before. Or it's Snoop Huntley, who made the Pro Bowl a couple of years ago because he relieved Lamar over the last, 5 games of that season and was able to, get things functioning. It's not, this isn't Lamar Jr., okay? You're not getting that from Snoop Huntley, but there's probably all kinds of things that you haven't used in your offense before, because you're not going to expose Tua as a runner, because you're not going to do some of those design types of things. If it is Snoop Huntley on Monday night, and if I were just guessing, Rich, I would say that's who the starting quarterback would be. There's going to be some unscouted stuff that the Titans are going to be facing, just because you would never do some of the things with Tua that you can do with Snoop. I would also say this: when you're talking about your franchise quarterback, the $53 million a year player in Tua Tagovailoa, you expect that guy to raise the level of everybody around you. When you're onto your backup quarterback or your third string quarterback, you need those other players to raise the level of the quarterback. Tyreek Hill did not play well last week. Jaylen Waddle did not play well last week. They got to play better in this game, regardless of who's at quarterback, for the Dolphins to have a chance.
And I assume Mostert not expected also on Monday night at this point in time?
Hasn't been practicing. We'll see. That's kind of a weird one. It's a chest injury for Raheem Mostert. They initially thought he was going to be back for their last game, and then he didn't practice. We'll get the final designation. I haven't seen it yet if Mike McDaniel said exactly what the designation is going to be, but certainly when a guy hasn't practiced in this long since an injury, you would think he's not going to play, which would mean it's Devon Achane's going to have to be leading that backfield.
I'll ask this on the air, even though this is an off-the-air question. When you come on this show, do you want us to take like a 30-second break to check your phone or something like that? Because I feel like I'm holding things back. Well, you're expertly working us through everything, and you're also receiving information. Honestly, we can talk amongst ourselves for a good 30 seconds if you gotta check on something.
If I got to take a call, I'll take a call. These are texts that might bear on some things I've said in the last 15 minutes on the show. So we'll update those
honestly
here.
Like we could
nothing
have like
catastrophic. Or something catastrophic. Like 2 weeks ago when Bryce Young got benched right before I came on, I'll give you the goods on that. This is still fluid here.
Dude, I could reach out to Jay-Z. We can get a musical act.
Yeah, I do like Pelissero
for 30
halftime.
seconds.
Yeah,
Pelissero, the 30-second act.
Crazy for this one, Tom.
All right.
I do like that.
We had Kevin O'Connell on yesterday. I asked him if he's expecting to see Jordan Love. He said yes. What do you think?
It certainly seems to be tracking in that direction, Rich. But if you had asked me last Friday, I would have said it seems like it's tracking for Jordan Love to have a chance to play in that game against Tennessee as well. Mm-hmm. The last two steps are going to be he needs to get medical clearance from the Packers doctors. And Jordan Love has to tell those doctors, tell the coaches, tell everybody, hey, I can do this. I want to be on the field. I think I can move. I can protect myself. I can play well enough. You go all the way back to when that injury occurred, which was 3 weeks ago today. It was a 3 to 6 week injury. That's the timetable they gave him for an MCL sprain. There was always optimism that he would be on the shorter end of that timetable, but this is the first game that really falls within the timetable. So right now, you would say based upon his level of participation, does not seem like he's had any setbacks. It's an MCL sprain, so you can play with a brace. MCL is going to heal while you play with that brace on. You would say this is the best chance yet for Jordan Love to be on the field. But, again, there's some final conversations that have to take place Friday and Saturday morning. Packers will have a good idea within 24 hours whether or not he's going to be on the field. It's a huge game. There's no doubt about it with the unbeaten Vikings coming to Lambeau Field. But, they've also kind of had their season on the line the past couple of weeks. They found a way to win with Malik Willis. Even if the reps are limited, Rich, I would say this with Jordan Love, they're running more or less the same type of game plan. They can expand it more. There's some additional things that they would do with Jordan Love, but it'd be pretty similar, even if he's not able to take all the reps through the week, which they're saying he's limited here. Jordan Love will be ready to roll if, in fact, all those conversations occur and he's out there on Sunday.
Couple of questions about Kansas City at Los Angeles. Justin Herbert's going to go, even with a bye coming up next week? What do you think?
He wants to go, and last week, despite all odds, despite about 5 rolls of tape on that ankle, he found his way to be out there. And really, he was pretty effective until the third quarter when he started taking those hits, and then he tweaked the ankle, and then it just, it wasn't something that he was going to be able to keep going on. Again, that's another injury that, if you feel confident that you can get out there and function well enough, there's a chance that you can heal while playing on a high ankle sprain. It's not good to keep injuring it, obviously, but there's nothing here that suggests that, anything's broken, anything has extended the timetable at this point. There's a lot of guys who don't necessarily have that same mentality of, hey, I'm going to put myself out there. I want to go every single week, so good for Justin Herbert. I don't think I know the Chargers wouldn't put him out there if they feel like he's putting himself in harm's way, but you're also talking about a team that's not going to have its starting tackles for the Chargers this week. And you're facing Chris Jones and that Kansas City front that's been really tough. Last week it was pretty clear by Saturday at the walkthrough that Justin Herbert was going to go. So another situation where in about 24 hours we'll probably have a good idea if he's going to be out there.
And Kareem Hunt is saying he's, going to be out there essentially. How are the Chiefs handling the running back position going into this game to try and go 4-0? What do you got on that?
Well, Kareem Hunt's the rare guy that you can sign off the couch, Rich, and a week later you can put him in there because he knows the offense. He's literally played in this offense for this coach on this team. It's amazing the symmetry to last year where it was an injury to Nick Chubb in the same week of the season, in week 2, that brought Kareem Hunt back in week 3, and he was playing for the Browns that week or the week after. Now, once again, he goes back to Kansas City. Everything I've heard is that he's in good shape. He had a good workout when he went through there. It's going to depend in part on just stamina and being in football shape and, how much conditioning you have and things like that in terms of how much they put him on the field. But, in terms of his readiness, it sounds like he's completely ready to roll. And so I would anticipate that he's certainly a factor in their plan this week.
Okay. And then last one for you here, the Caleb Williams conversation that I think only ratchets up a little bit because he hasn't won. The Bears haven't won since week 1. Jayden Daniels just looked superb. He really did. And a wow factor that we thought we'd be seeing from Caleb Williams from jump, even though that might be an unfair expectation level. Bo Nix just won on the road as well. What are you hearing? What is the conversation about Caleb Williams in Chicago going into start 4 for him, Tom?
Rich, I went back after that Thursday night or Monday night performance by Jayden Daniels and looked at that quarterback thing that I write every year before the draft, where I talk to all the coaches, GMs, executive scouts, without using their names to get honest, unvarnished opinions about players. And Caleb Williams was the number 1 quarterback. He was the consensus guy. The lead quote in the Jayden Daniels section was from a scout who's got a good track record on this, who told me he would take Jayden Daniels if he had the number 1 pick. And his reasoning was because Jayden Daniels is more polished from the pocket, because Jayden Daniels seems to be on the ascent where Caleb's kind of been going flat over the last year in his college career. And because, in the scout's words, I think Jayden loves ball more. With Jayden Daniels, you're seeing that polish from the pocket. I mean, he is throwing dots with pressure on him. He's about to take a hit, and he's making plays from the pocket. With Caleb, you're kind of seeing some of the things you saw in college, which is that he'll make some hellacious plays outside the pocket. That one last week where he's rolling to his left and contorts his body sideways and throws it like a shortstop to the open receiver. You look at that and you go, holy cow, he can make those throws. That's in there. The playmaking ability is in there. And it's not as if, understanding the offense and things like that is beyond him, but just the regular plays and the playing from the pocket and going through the processes, it's just not something that he had to do a whole lot in college. And you're seeing some of those bumps in the early going here. Last year we got not that far into the season and it was CJ Stroud lighting it up and Bryce Young was struggling, even though Bryce Young beat CJ Stroud.
That's right.
When those two went head to head here. And that's kind of the direction that it's gone as we move forward. A big question, throughout this process was how quickly was Caleb going to be able to really function and play within the confines of an offense? It's 3 games. It's a long season. He's not getting benched. But yeah, there's some things that need to be cleaned up here. I think that, Chicago and Caleb Williams, you have to put TBD behind that with Jayden Daniels and Washington right now. Even though, again, it's 3 games, it's early. You got a dude who looks pretty special. It doesn't look too big for him. It looks right out of the gate like he can handle this. You still wonder about, how well is he going to slide? The slide's a work in progress, but in terms of not putting himself in harm's way, he's done a good job of that. And he has shown how good he is in the pocket. I'm not surprised that Jayden Daniels is doing what he's doing. I'm just surprised he's doing it with the consistency, the throw to McLaurin and the plays that he made in that game. It's been cool to watch. It's the perfect coaches for him. Dan Quinn seems to have wrapped his arms around him. Cliff's running the right offense for him. It's been really good out of the gate.
And then I guess I lied. I do have one more for you, even though I know you keep looking at your phone. You're the one who mentioned Bryce Young as well. And so we saw what Dalton did last week, and now Andy Dalton's going on his tour of former teams, Cincinnati first, Chicago next, right? And then, so honestly, what is the metric by which Bryce Young would actually get back in after what we just saw, right? I mean, you got a guy who just spun it up. They're 1-2. And what's your take on what the aftermath of week 3 was for the Panthers before I let you go, Tom?
If the Panthers are winning, Andy Dalton's not coming out of the lineup. That's the simplest way that I can put it. With Bryce Young, there is still a belief in him. They still think this guy can develop into being the guy that they drafted number 1 overall. It just wasn't something that they could sell in the locker room based upon those first 2 games. And so they go to Dalton. If, the next 3 games, if they're 2-4 and Dalton's just being mediocre, you'll see Bryce Young back in there. If they're 4-2 in those games, I don't think you're seeing Bryce Young. anytime soon. Dave Canales has a lot of veteran players who've seen stuff in that locker room. It's, Adam Thielen just went on IR, but it's Deontay Johnson and Jadeveon Clowney is on that team. Some of those veteran dudes, they know. The players always know. And what they saw last week was Andy Dalton functioning in an offense that looked dysfunctional with Bryce Young at quarterback. So there's no reason to rush Bryce Young back into it. It's definitely jarring when you see Andy Dalton walking to the sideline and Bryce Young's job on game day is basically to hand Andy the iPad or the Microsoft Surface tablet, excuse me.
Yes.
That's humbling. There's no doubt about it. But Bryce Young's a humble guy already. It's not as if he came in here and thought he had nothing to work on. It just hasn't worked out to this point. There's a long history, Rich, of quarterbacks getting benched early in their career, and even guys who ended up being Super Bowl winners. Guys like Terry Bradshaw and Troy Aikman, John Elway. These guys got benched early on in their careers, and they came back and they did it. With Bryce, it hasn't looked like he's an NFL quarterback so far. If you took the nameplate off and just said, hey, that's, not to bag on it, but that's PJ Walker out there, you go, oh, okay, about the same size, kind of stumbling, not great so far here. He hasn't looked like the number 1 overall draft pick. It's still early in his career. Look at all the other high draft pick quarterbacks who right now are playing better for other teams. The book is not written on Bryce Young, but right now Andy Dalton holds the pen.
You're the man. Thanks, Tom. By the way, you can call it an iPad here on this show.
Hey, I'm very conscientious of the sponsors, okay? We love our Microsoft Surface tablets.
I know that.
That's not one right there.
No, I know. But you should stay in that habit, because if you get out of practice here, maybe you'll say it on the wrong spot on NFL Network. So
that's correct.
I'm
Microsoft Surface tablets.
Yes, indeed.
Love Microsoft.
There you go. Tom Pelissero, everybody. He's going to be sitting in this chair for a lot next week while I'm in London, but I'll zoom in every now and then to make sure everybody's on the up and up. Thanks, Tom. You be well. See you this weekend.
Yeah.
Tom Pelissero, everybody. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.